It is amazing how fortunate I've been. I have lived a charmed life. In December 2018, I will be 71 years old, and I have survived. 22nd, 1947, in Austin, Texas. I was actually born a month premature, so it stunted my growth. At my full height, I was 5'9", but now I seem to be somewhere between 5'8" and 5'8 and a quarter. So I don't know if I've shrunk just because I'm getting older, or they've been mismeasuring me all these years, or I'm actually shrinking, the incredible shrinking woman. But I had what on the outside would be a normal boy's life in Austin, Texas. My parents grew up in the Great Depression, and my father was a soldier in World War II. And a couple of years after the war, I was born. And my father grew up in a time when you had to be rough. You had to fight all the time, because that's what boys and men did, to survive in those times when everybody was poor. He grew up the son of the town barber in a small town not too far northwest of Austin, Texas. And my mother grew up on a farm, pretty much the same distance to the northeast of Austin. And her younger brother seemed to have had not quite as rough a life as my father did. But they were conventional people in the 1950s, and I was their firstborn. 3.5 years later, my sister was born. And as I say, on the surface, I was very normal, except from time to time, there would be indications that something was going on differently in my mind, and my parents tried to ignore it or talk me out of it or think that it was a phase. But these phases seemed to come and go all my life. There were times when I don't want to use air quotes, to dress up. And my mother would notice that her shoes or a skirt or something was in the wrong place or something like that. My sister, I don't know how much she knew of this from time to time, and she had problems of her own. When she was very young, she would pull out her hair and tickle her nose with it while sucking her thumb, and then she also had a blanket. When she got older, she was maybe 10 or 11, she took an overdose of aspirin. I don't know if I had anything to do with it, but, my being different and all, because most of the time I thought I acted different. I thought we had a normal relationship, sibling relationship, not, I was the older brother. My father would try to toughen me up. He bought me a set of barbells once, and we didn't have room in the house for them, so since they were stainless steel and I think painted, he just left them outside. One day someone came along with a pickup and stole them, and my father ran after them, but he didn't get to the curb in time. I was secretly happy about that. But I grew up, I seemed normal anyway. I went to high school, I went to college, and I never had more than one friend at a time, and always male friends, although there was a time when I was younger that I had friends who lived next door to my grandparents, who were girls, but I didn't have that sisterly relationship with them, of course. But, we did all the great things that middle-class people did in the 50s and 60s, and my folks had a lake place, and we would go out there and swim in the very cold water that came from the dam of the adjoining lake. We would visit cousins, and my cousin Larry and I would climb all over the hills in a town just next to the one I'm living in now, actually. Although neither one were actually towns at the time, they were just kind of places with camping cabins and that sort of thing. I went through college. It was during the Vietnam era, so I was subject to the draft, and my parents suggested that I should volunteer for the draft. It would go easier on me, so I did that. Luckily, I did not have to go to Vietnam. I was not a great recruit. I was made a clerk typist, a specialist. 4 was my highest rank, and I did my 2 years in the Army. The 2 weeks in basic training were the worst, but I spent most of my time in the Army in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., basically as a clerk typist. But when I volunteered for the draft, I missed my college graduation, so I wasn't able to be in that ceremony. So I came out of the service. I used the GI Bill to actually go back to college, and during that time, I could say I began my transition very slowly, mostly in secret. My sister, by then, was in the same college, and when I visited her, she visited me. She was embarrassed that I had shaved my legs and was wearing shorts and thinking of myself as cute, I guess. But mostly, I presented as a straight male most of the time, but I was letting myself be myself. Finally, after a couple of more years in college, I decided that I was going, and nobody transitioned it. Nobody knew to do that, but I found out that it was possible in California, in San Francisco, to live as a woman, and that there were surgeons around that would do the surgery. I knew very little, but I plunged into it. I took what money I had saved in the bank and went to California through the deserts of West Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. I must say that the deserts got more and more dry as we went west, Texas being the most fertile of the deserts. And so I had written to someone who I guess I found in a magazine, a transgender woman who was living in California, in San Francisco, and I wrote her asking if I could stay with her for a while until I found a place of my own, which I did. And if you want to kind of see a fictionalized version of my months in San Francisco, go to my play Among Amazons here at kalichi.tripod.com/among.html. You'll see that down here. A lot of it is fictionalized, but most of the characters were people I knew. Just names, of course, and certain circumstances were different, but most of it was just as, I think, interesting as the real life. So I did that, and I found a job in a place called Glide Memorial Church, which is very, counterculture church in San Francisco, and I was a clerk typist, and the office secretary, a friend of mine from the Philippines originally, she was the church secretary, and she eventually asked me if I would like to rent her basement apartment, which I did, and so I was like a member of the family, and her little daughter would come down, and she was 5 years old, and put makeup on her, and she liked that, and I would, we'd go out to eat. I went to their timeshare in Lake Tahoe one time in the summertime when no one else was there, and I went gambling at the casino on the Nevada side. First time I ever went gambling. Played the slot machines. Went crazy when 60 silver dollars, this was in the time of silver dollars, fell into the metal tray. And I thought I was making millions, and I'll just keep playing, and I'll make millions and millions of dollars. Never did that. So I got a job in a small town south of San Francisco, and I worked for an insurance company there. And San Francisco area then is like the whole world is now as far as transgender people are, except that we were kind of looked down on even by gay people, sometimes especially by gay people, of both or all three stripes. But anyway, my friend's husband, who was also my friend, of course, loaned me the money for my sexual reassignment surgery. And I was able to pay him back from the insurance from the company that I worked for. And how lucky can you get? I came to San Francisco in December of 1974, just a little bit before my birthday. And I transitioned. The next morning after I moved in, I was walking out in public, dressed as a woman for the first time in public, and like it was the most natural thing in the world. It was great. And somehow I knew how to fall into my voice, and it's still not perfect, and I get misgendered sometimes, very rarely now, but sometimes at drive-through restaurants. But it has served me well. I've worked for the state of Texas in various agencies for over 30 years. At one agency, the last agency I was with for 27 years, I'm drawing state pension. I now have Social Security since I've retired, and Medicare, so I'm very lucky to have all this. I'm very much in debt, which is my own fault, and I need to work on that. And I'm not happy with looking old for the first time in my life. I used to look so young for all my life. People thought I was 10, 20 years younger than I really was, and now it's catching up to me. But this is a good angle for me. So I have been very lucky. I had some relationship with my parents. I would see my mother from time to time, eventually. And when I was working for the state, when I was in the office, my father would come over to my house and maybe fix my lawnmower, see if things were okay. So that was as close as we got in those years. But my sister still hates me, and I think that I have made another video about an incident in the last couple of years, a misunderstanding with my sister that made her hate me even more. I won't go into that right now, but all in all, I've been very lucky. I was off hormones twice, that's why I call this the third transition. The last time for more than 20 years. About 2 years ago, I got back on them again, and look, I got breast development. This is not implants, and I'm still hoping, and I'm starting to get a little shape here. It may not be all that visible to you, but I can tell, and I can feel it, and back here too, finally. Ta-da. So that's my remarkable story. Not as remarkable as these others, but miracles can happen, and I'm not a religious person, but life itself is a miracle. And to be able to change your life for the better, to be who you really are, that is a true miracle.